right? Okay. First, okay, I need a sidekick. Here we go. So first thing that I thought that first you want to know is you grow what you love, because if you're not going to eat it, there's no sense growing it, and unless you know people that love it and will want to do it for someone else. I want to do just a couple little rules of thumb. I read somewhere that you can plant potatoes as soon as you get dandelions in your lawn. Even though they grow up and they might freeze, the root itself doesn't freeze, they'll keep growing back. So I've planted already. I've planted some not radishes. I planted my cabbage plants because they do well in the colder weather. I've planted my beets and my carrots. I planted peas. I've planted turnips, lettuce, chard, a couple kinds of chard. The things that will freeze when they come up, there is a rule of thumb that I'm going to show you. If you look over here at Gertsen, L'Oreal, you're going to have to turn it up there. You come right here, the end of this street, right up there where the mountain kind of comes down to a V, come right here. She's on the other side of that telephone pole. You see that little saddle that's between there? That's Gertsen. And I've grown up knowing that when the snow is off Gertsen, then you can plant your freezables. So that's when I plant my beans and my cucumbers, when I put out my tomato plants and I put out pepper plants and all that stuff. So when the snow's off Gertsen, you can put all your other stuff, but once you cold weather stuff, like the fruits, things that are going to go down in the ground, you can plant earlier. And honestly, I wait till Nancy Wilson starts planting her beautiful garden, and then I know I can start planting right. Most years though, this is my first year that I planted this early. Usually I just plant it all at once at Mother's Day because I haven't laid out my garden well enough to know what I want where. And my garden got tilled about 3 weeks earlier than normal, so I thought, well, I can plant earlier. So let's go over a couple things on planting. L'Oreal had asked that I talk about I think first you might want to lay out your garden so you know what you want to plant where. If Scott were here, he would have measured between each row. I don't measure between rows. I'm going to show you a little tool I have. So, rule of thumb for when you plant, you need to know how deep to put the seeds and kind of how far to put them apart. Also how wide to put your rows apart. If you buy seeds in packets like these, I don't, but if you do, you can use these. And on the back there's a veritable bunch of information that tells you a lot of, the most important thing for me is it tells you if you need full sun or shade, because for me that's the biggest thing. You've got to have the sun or the shade for them. But it tells you how deep to put on, like Swiss chard, you put down a 1/2 inch, it tells you here. And it gives you information like how far to thin them, how far to put them apart. So with these, each of my little, I'm going to show you those little things. They have different sizes and different spacings. They have a name that tells you exactly what goes in it. So I'm gonna fake plant a row because I don't have anything I plant yet, because the snow is still on Gertsen. If I planted it would freeze. But this little thing, if you read on your packet, it tells you that it has to be X amount of thing. You measure here, and then I can move this little thing. So it comes in here. Let's pretend that it says, like, my hand is 8, 16, 24 inches is right here. So I bring this down here to 24, maybe. We'll pretend it's working. So as you plant, let's pretend I'm planting right here. And so as you plant, this goes down, it makes a little ruts. The seeds come through here, out the back. And this makes a little line so I know where my next row goes, because it has, see that? Then I can follow that row back. So that kind of gives you an idea for how far you want your rows apart, depending on what your seed packets, you use packets. I get my seed in bulk, and I go up to Logan, to Anderson Seed. They have so many different kinds of seeds. Like pumpkins, I had a choice of 17 different kinds of pumpkins. They change most years, but I can buy it like from, their smallest is like 1/8 of an ounce or something, 32nd of an ounce. And so planting there, let's see. I don't know, I know what, this is it. Let me grab my paper. of the things that when you learn about, if you don't have your growing guide on the back of a packet, one of the things you can do is a kind of a common way to know how deep to plant your seeds. They say to take the width of your seed and double it. So if you want to measure those little itty bitty carrot seeds, you can do that. But nah, we'll go over some things because I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to measure my seeds. I'll just tell you that with carrots and stuff like that, you just barely want it under the surface of the soil because they want to grow down, and you want the top of the carrot to be able to come out, but you want everything down. So you don't need to plant a carrot to an inch deep. It won't make it to start with, but also with carrots, one thing you want to be careful is that you keep them moist. If the top of the soil gets crusted over, it's harder for the carrot to come up. So this year I'm trying something new, and as you garden and as I garden, you'll try. Some things don't work one year, so you learn from it. You don't do it ever again until you forget and you try it again, then it didn't work the second time. This year I have carrots I've already planted, and I put some straw over the top of it, and I'm going to see how that works so that will keep it moist, and I'm hoping it will germinate faster. I have a friend who told me that he puts a 2x4 over the top of his. He plants them, gets them wet, plants, and just throws a 2x4 over for 2 weeks. I wasn't that brave. I thought it would smother them. I don't know why. He says he does and it works, but I'm going to try this first, and if it works, great, and if it doesn't, then next year I'll try the 2x4. So one thing I learned too is, well, let's see, like carrots and lettuce really are the two that you have to just kind of barely plant under the soil. Just carrots, and it's like a 1/4 inch, just sprinkle. Some people, when they plant carrots, if you're doing it by hand, I know Chris the Danishman, who bring up some history in here, my dad was telling me when he sowed his carrots, he would mix the carrot seed with the same amount of sand, and as he hand planted, he'd pick them up, and that way the sand would come down and he wouldn't know what was seed or sand, and that automatically spaced them a bit for him. So I haven't tried that because my cedar works just great, but if you have shorter rows and you don't have one of these, then, and Nancy again, she tells me she just plants hers by hand too. So 1/4 inch at the most for lettuce and carrots. If you put in beets or chard or kale, I'm trying to think what else down here, radishes, spinach, those go about a 1/2 inch into the ground. One thing I learned with your beets and chard, I've learned the beet seeds are kind of big. Have you seen beet seeds? And I will plant and I get like 2 or 3 beets out of the hole, and I've never understood that, thinking that my seeder wasn't working right. I just found out that with both the chard and the beets, there are 2 to 4 seeds stuck together, and that's what makes each of those bean things. Did you know that? I didn't either. I read that.
No.
Not Google. I do the Farmer's Almanac a lot and read a lot of stuff in there, and that's where I found that out this year because I couldn't understand why I kept having beets. So then that brings me to one other thing I want to talk about with your carrots and beets. It's important to thin, and I don't do that. I have a hard time plucking something out of the ground that's growing. And with my beets and carrots, I have a hard time. One year I thought I'd do that with my cucumbers, and after about this far of pulling out, I was in tears because I'm stupid, I know, but I was crying as I'm pulling up. So anyway, I mitigated the problem with my beans and my cucumbers, because if you see, I have a fence right here that's kind of up, and each of the paneling has a line. I will plant 1 bean or 1 cucumber seed at each of those so they don't come up, I don't have to thin. But radishes beets and carrots, you have to thin. They just don't grow well. And I've always thought you just go in, you pick them and feel bad, and then you leave the ones that hope you can. But I learned, and I think I can do this. I'm going to do it this year. This is a new thing I'm going to try. As your carrots come up, as you pull them, and I've experienced this, as you pull them to thin them, the other ones don't seem to grow as well. And I found out it's because you're disturbing the roots. And both the beet and carrot roots are really picky and finicky. They don't transplant well because they just don't like movement. So I learned that if you just cut the top off and don't disturb the part at the bottom. And even though it's the same thing as killing the plant, I don't have to physically pull it out. I feel better just snipping off the top, so I'm going to try that. And if it's the beets, then I can have the beet greens, so I love beet greens. So that's one thing I'm going to work on this year, try that. And maybe we can come back and see how that did it. Things like beans and, what is it, let's see, beans and peas, cucumbers, corn, zucchini, any of your squash plants, you'll plant those about an inch deep. Not much more than that because they need a chance to erupt through the ground, and if you get them too deep, they won't do it. One thing I want to talk about, I have never planted onions from seeds or cucumbers or cauliflower, anything like that from seed, or cabbage. I always buy my cabbage plant. Nancy, my ardent gardener over there, she plants it all from seed and seems to do well, but I still haven't made that leap to it, probably because I don't have my garden ready as soon as she does. So come over here, I'll show you what I've done over here. So one of the things if you look here, I have these right here, my onions. And these are Walla Walla onions, and I buy those, I think they call them starch. They just come in a bunch, and they already have the green growing on them. So you need to plant by seed. I think onions take a long time, and that's why I don't do the seed, because they just take longer. But Nancy doesn't. She has beautiful onions every year. So I plant my Walla Walla onions. They're not a storage onion. They have to be eaten fairly within 3-4 months maybe after picking. They are so good, and they're sweet and can't eat it like an apple, but they're still good. The other way to plant, oh, I spilled them. So my mom has a garden, and she plants her onions like this. These are called onion sets. And so these is what she uses. These are storage onions. They'll store through the winter. And she planted all of hers and said she was through and asked if I wanted them. And I know better than to tell my mom no. So I took the seeds, the sets, and so I'm going to be planting onions. I have some whites, some yellows, and some reds. And we're going to go plant some of those. Just want to show you how far down to put them. When you plant starts like these, if you look really close, there's where the kind of the papery part is. You just put the white under the ground and then cover the rest up with dirt. And as they grow up, they'll come out of the ground, and it's okay to leave them out of the ground. If you get potatoes that pop their heads up out of the ground, you want to cover those back up with dirt and heal them back up, because they get the sunburn on them, they turn green, and part of that is poison. You don't want to eat too much, make you sick. Okay. It's called, I don't know what it's called. I call it a cedar. This is nice because each of the let me pull it out here so you can see it. They have different size wheels. If you look at this kind of close, this automatically spaces your seeds, so it goes through and it will tip a seed out here, then it'll tip another seed here, and you just row it down. It has a little thing here you can measure the depth and change your depth. It's not real accurate for me in a garden like this because I have a bunch of lumps and stuff, so if I hit something, it might get more dirt in it than I want. But this is an awesome tool that I use when I have my long rows to do. But you don't need it. That's why I was talking to Nancy again. Nancy was a flake. She wouldn't come stand by me and be my sidekick. Don't tell I call her a flake. Edit that part out, I don't know. So anyway, you just take your little hoe, the end of a hoe, and you just make a little line, and then you just sprinkle down your seeds.